So, I talked about this a little bit with the quiz the other day, but if you give me the correct answer but not in the right form, sorry, you must follow the form. Now, if I say slope-intercept form, what is that form?
That's the y equals mx plus b.
If you don't know that tomorrow, you're in trouble. Okay? So, when I have y equals mx plus b, what is the m?
M is going to be the slope.
And b is the?
Y-intercept.
So, if they tell me that m is negative 1/2, I'm going to put negative 1/2 where m is, right?
Yes, sir.
And if the y-intercept is 1, that's my b value. So my equation is going to be y equals negative 1/2 x plus uno. Questions there? That should be the easiest question on the whole test. Yes? Okay, I should not see Chromebooks open right now. This is too important for you to not be paying attention. This is on your test tomorrow. All right, the slope is negative 2. That's my m value, right? Just like this was my b value. And b equals 8. So what's my equation? Y equals negative 2x plus 8. Now, I can't remember if anyone in this class did it or not, but there was a kid in the last class who typed in his answer. It was a different answer, obviously, but he made this mistake.
He's a dum-dum.
I don't need to call names, but he insisted that he needed to get credit for that question because I knew I was supposed to, or because he said I was supposed to know what he was thinking, or I was supposed to know what he meant.
Yes.
And I said, I understand what you're saying, but you have to be ridiculously clear on a test because I can only take what I see, and what I see is you gave me an addition problem, not the equation of a line. Forgetting an x changes the entire meaning of what you are putting there, right? You are giving me something that should simplify to that, which is a horizontal line that goes through the y-axis at 6. Not even related to this at all, right?
Right.
So that little x, don't be that person that forgets the x. It is important.
They had us
Capiche?
in the first half, I'm not gonna lie.
What?
They had us in the first half. I'm not gonna lie.
They
He tried to make you think that like he was right. He wasn't.
No, he wasn't. Okay. Now, I have something that passes through 4, 2, and 5, negative 1. This was a question that was missed a lot on yesterday's quiz. So if I have 2 points, first off, to write my equation, I need the slope and I need the y-intercept, right? I have 2 points. What can I get?
The slope.
The slope. And how do I find the slope?
Y1 minus y2 minus y1.
Over. Right?
Yep.
So, this is going to give me my slope. Negative 1 minus 2 over 5 minus 4. And that gives me negative 3 over 1. So my slope is negative 3. Now, I'm going to show you 2 different ways to get to your answer here. The first way I'm going to show you, people looked at me like I was crazy, like they'd never seen this before. Well, go back and look at lesson F1. That's what it was. There's a lot of problems like this. I know that the equation is y equals mx plus b. I know that m is negative 3. So how am I going to find b? Well, pick a point, plug in the y value for y and the x value for x, and you can solve for b. Negative 3 times 4 is 12. And then it's negative 12. You will add 12, and b equals 14. You cannot just pick one of these y values to be your y-intercept. It's not a y-intercept. It's not on the on the y-axis. Okay? So there's my b value. So my answer is going to be y equals negative 3x plus 14. Okay, that is a process we learned. You have another option though to get that answer. You could use point slope form. If I plugged this point, and you can plug in either one, into point slope form, I would have y minus 2 equals my slope times x minus 4. And I could take that then and rearrange it to slope-intercept form. How do I rearrange it? I distribute negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12. And then I would move the 2 over. And that gives me y equals negative 3x plus 14. So either way is fine. Just pick one way and do it. But you cannot just take a y value and call it the b value. Make sense? Okay. All right, here is a line. And I need to write the equation in slope-intercept form. So I need to know the slope, and I need to know the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept should be the easier thing to find, and it looks like it's crossing the y-axis where?
At negative 5.
At negative 5. Please read carefully. There was a quiz where it crossed right here and everyone kept saying 3.
Wow.
And I'm like, it's 2 above the x-axis. That's 2, not 3. And some of you are laughing because you know it was you, right? Okay, just be careful. Make sure you're counting correctly. Now, my slope, I need to find another point that happens to fall where grid lines cross, right? And I can pick any one I want to. I'll pick this one, for example. Yes. I'm sorry, yes, you're right. Put it in the wrong place, thank you. So I picked another point, and I'm going to calculate my slope. Now I have a question. Is my slope going to be positive or negative? Negative. Why? Because we read a graph from left to right, and if you look from left to right, we're going downhill. That makes the slope negative. So now I'm going to do my rise value, which would be 4, and my run value, which is 2. And what is negative 4 over 2? Negative 2. So there's my slope, there's my y-intercept. My equation is y equals negative 2x minus 5.
Yes.
Okay?
Nice.
E and F look like they're both just rearranging problems. I just need to rearrange this to get it in slope-intercept form. And same thing here. How am I going to get it in slope-intercept form? I'm going to get y by itself, right?
Yes.
So what should I do first?
Subtract 3x.
Subtract 3x.
On both sides.
Yep. That leaves me with 4y equals. Now I can't subtract 3x from negative 20
So negative 3.
because they're not like terms, right? One has an x, one doesn't. How should I write these then?
Negative 3 over 4.
Not over 4 yet.
Oh, x.
minus
Yes. And I write the x first because that mx plus b has the x term first. Now what do I do? Because y isn't quite by itself yet.
So,
Divide everything by 4. So y equals, how am I going to write this?
negative 3x over 4.
Negative 3/4, and bump that x out to the side.
Minus 5.
And then negative 20 divided by 4 is minus 5. By the way, as you're typing these things into the computer, some people are still having a little bit of trouble with the fractions. When you use that fraction thing, you know, it pops up something that looks like this,
Press the down.
right? And if you're trying to type in negative 3/4, type in a negative before the fraction sign.
Oh,
Or you can plug it in on the top, it doesn't matter.
okay.
But just type it in before, it's easier. And then you'll type in your 3, and then everybody comes up to me and says, how do I get down to that bottom box? Because they use their mouse and they try and click in the bottom box and it won't let them. Press the down arrow button on the keyboard, and it'll take you to the denominator. Okay? All right. Last one in slope-intercept form. I need to get rid of parentheses first because there's no parentheses in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to distribute negative 1/5. What's negative 1/5 times x?
That's 1/5.
Negative 1/5 x, right? And negative 1/5 times negative 5. Well, I know negative times a negative is going to make a positive.
Plus 1.
And 1/5 times 5 is really times 5 over 1. 1 times 5 is 5. 5 times 1 is 5. It equals 1, doesn't it?
Yes.
I'm almost in slope-intercept form. Add 2. And y equals negative 1/5 x
Plus 3.
plus 3. Okay. Any questions about slope-intercept form? Because this is the whole section about slope-intercept form. Ask me now, because tomorrow you don't get a chance to. No? We good? All right. Next section, point-slope form. What is point-slope form? Y minus y1 equals m, parentheses, x minus x1. And the y1 and the x1 are from a point, right? So, I have a point and I have a slope. That should be my giveaway that I'm using point slope. Yeah? So, when I use y minus y1, y minus, what is the y value from the point? 1 equals the slope times x minus the x value. Now, minus a negative 5 is going to become what? Plus 5. So we need to keep in mind that the sign of the number here is opposite the sign of the number in the point. It changes because of the way the formula works. Okay? All right, letter B, also in point slope form. Now, on your test, I think I have it set up. If I don't, you can pick any point. But I think I have it set up where, like, I specifically have a point drawn on there. And that's the point I want you to use when you're writing point slope form. So what is that point there? Negative 2, negative 2. That's the point that I'll use to write it this way. Okay? Now, when you were doing your homework, you may have done something slightly different. You may have used a different point simply because one wasn't noted on there, but on the test it is. So, I do need to find the slope, so I need to find another point. And if I use this point, do I have a positive slope or a negative slope? How do I know? It's a positive slope because I'm going in or uphill, right? It's going up. So the rise part, 1, 2, 3. And the run part, 2. So if I put that in my point slope form, I have y minus negative 2 equals 3/2, parentheses, x minus negative 2. Questions there? Awesome. All right, we got 2 points, which is fantastic, but I also need the slope, don't I? So how am I going to find the slope? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So 3 minus negative 5 and negative 4 minus negative 5. This is going to become a plus, giving me 8. This is going to become a plus, giving me 1. So my slope is 8. Yes? Okay. Now, I have 2 options for my answer because I can use this point to write my answer, or I can use this point to write my answer. Please do not write both. On the quiz I handed back yesterday, a lot of people wrote both. And if you get one thing wrong in one of them, then I have to mark something wrong, right? I can't give you full credit for a problem that has a wrong answer to it. So just give me one and call it done. So let's see, y minus a negative 5 would become y plus 5 equals 8 parentheses x minus negative 5 is also going to become a plus 5. That's one way I can write it. The other way I can write it is y minus 3 is equal to 8 parentheses x minus negative 4 becoming plus 4. So either one of those works as my answer. Questions there? Okay. Letter D is a little funky.
Yes.
passes through the point 1,4 and has a y-intercept of 2. Well, if I look at this graph right here, just as a reference, a y-intercept of 2, isn't that a point? Is it a point on the graph?
Yeah.
Therefore, it is an ordered pair. A y-intercept of 2 is the point 0, 2.
Yes.
And if I have 2 points, I'm just doing what I did in the last problem. So I'm going to find the slope doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That gives me -2 over -1, or +2. If I use this point to write my equation, I have y minus 4 equals 2 parentheses x minus 1. If I use this point to write my equation, which, by the way, when you're doing point slope form, I would suggest avoiding writing an equation that has a 0 in the point, or avoid the point that has a 0 in it if you can, just because sometimes it gets tricky. I would have y minus 2 equals 2, and then there's no reason for me to put x minus 0 in parentheses, right? Because it's just x. So either one of those is correct. Yes, ma'am?
Are we gonna have a question like this?
I don't know. It's fair game. Okay. All right. Any other questions about point slope form before we go to the backside? Beautiful. Turn it over. Identify the point and the slope, or identify the slope and the point. Yep, and then graph. Okay. So what is the slope in this equation? -3, right? There's my slope. And what's the point they give me? -1, +2. I have to change those signs, right? Just like when I put them into the equation, I had to change them. So I'm going to start off with that point, -1, 2, and plot that. And then that's going to be my starting place. My slope is -3, so what do? Down 3, right 1. Down 3, right 1. I'm not going to worry about using a ruler right now, because since you're doing this on the computer, you'll have a straight line no matter what you do, right?
Yeah.
So that's about what your line should look like. Capiche? All right, what's my slope over here? -1. Right there. What is my point that they give me? 3, -1. +3, -1. And then a slope of -1 tells me to do what?
Just keep going down one.
Down 1,
To the
right 1. Down 1, right 1. And so my line is going to look something like that. That's a pretty straight line for being free-handed, isn't it? I'm kind of proud of that one. All right, down here, what's the slope? 1/2.
Yes.
What is the point they give me?
3 negative. Same thing.
3 -1, same as the last one, right? 3 -1. My slope is 1/2, so how am I going to go?
Up 1.
Up 1 over 2. I can't do another one, so I'm going to draw my line from there, and it's something like that. Now, please remember, if your slope is negative, your line better be going down. Negative, down. Positive, up. What direction is this one going to be going?
That was going to be going
Down, because it's negative. So my slope here is -2/3. Again, just keep that negative sign with the top number. What's the point they give me for this one? +1, +3. 1, 3. And then how am I going to move?
down.
Down 2,
To the right 3.
to the right 3, and I can't fit another one on there, so my line looks something like that. So?
So.
Any questions about those graphing ones from point slope form? Okay. Question 4. Review question. Don't you like how we give you like parts A, B, C, D, so we can say, oh, there's only 5 questions on your homework, but really it's like 20.
Yeah, it's pretty useful.
Okay, evaluate the function f of x equals -3x plus 2 for x equals negative 2, x equals 0, and x equals 5. What is that problem asking me to do? Remember, this is review. This is from a module or a chapter a long time ago.
It's asking you to plug it in.
It's asking me to plug in values. In other words, this is called function notation. I need to find f of
X.
negative 2. I need to find f of 0. And I need to find f of 5. Okay? Now, that's just a notation thing. That's not like f times negative 2 that I have to divide by negative 2. It's not anything like that. This is just how we write the problem. So now I'm going to take the equation, negative 3x plus 2. And what did I do with the x? I put parentheses. What do I put in the parentheses? A negative 2. Well, negative 3 times negative 2 is what? Positive 6 plus 2 is, so f of negative 2 is 8. Okay? Now if I do this one, negative 3x plus 2, what do I fill in the parentheses with? 0 this time. Negative 3 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. And then the last one, negative 3x plus 2 again. What am I plugging in for x? 5. What is negative 3 times 5? Negative 15 plus 2? Negative 13. So? This one is actually pretty much asking the same thing. However, we should have one more column out here. That is just g of x. So here's the equation. I need to plug in the x values so that I can get out the y values, right? So 1/2 x plus 1, and this is saying plug in negative 2 for x. What's 1/2 times negative 2? Or 1/2 of negative 2 is negative 1, right? Plus 1 is 0. You can also go to your calculator for these. 1/2 times 0 plus 1. What's 1/2 times 0? 0. Plus 1 is 1. And then finally 1/2 x plus 1, and this time I'm plugging in 2. What's 1/2 times 2? 1. Plus 1 is 2. Any questions there? All right. The last few here, it says write the equation in slope-intercept form, which is what? So pretty much these 4 equations are just about rearranging them to get y by itself. So starting here, what would I do to get y by itself? Subtract 3x. Okay, so that gives me negative 9y is equal to what? Negative 3x plus 3. And then what would I do? Divide each of those by negative 9. So that cancels out. I have y equals. Now I know I'm going to bump the x out to the side, but what's negative 3 over negative 9? Positive 1 over 3. 3 over 9 reduces to 1 over 3. Right? It's a pizza that's cut into 9 pieces and you ate 3 of them, you ate 1/3 of the pizza. Then I put the x, and then positive 3 over negative 9 would be negative another 1/3. Thankfully, I don't need to do anything with that 1/3. I can just leave it there. Now, someone in my last class said, will it be marked wrong if I put 3 over 9? Yes. You always have to reduce a fraction. Always, 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 always.
This is the basics.
Okay. All right, letter B. How do I get y by itself? Add x. So 3y is equal to what? X minus 6. Now what? Divide by 3. So I get y equals, what am I going to write here? 1/3 x. And then negative 6 over 3 would be minus 2. Yes. No, because I added it. It was negative x over here, so I had to plus x to go over here. Okay. All right, the last two are going from point slope form, so what do I need to do? Get rid of the parentheses. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Add your 1 so that y can be by itself. And I get y equals negative 2x minus 1. And the last one. Again, get rid of those parentheses first. 1/2 times x is 1/2 x. And what's 1/2 times 2? It's going to be positive. You can do that on your calculator, right? 0.5 times 2. And then I'm going to subtract 3. So y equals 1/2 x, what? Minus 2. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Can you show how to find the y-intercept when you have the slope as a fraction?
How to find the y-intercept when you have the slope as a fraction.
Yeah, kind of like
Letter what? F? 1F?
Yeah.
Okay, how to find the y-intercept? Okay, well this one I can just multiply out, right? And get that one. I have a feeling you might be talking about one like these guys. If you're wanting to put that in y equals mx plus b form.
No, like,
So like this one when you're trying to put it in slope-intercept form. If you're trying to put it in y equals mx plus b form, you would have y plus 1 equals 1/2 x, right? Minus 3/2, and you would have to subtract 1, right? So y equals 1/2 x, and then this is the part that gets tricky, right? Yeah? Well, first off, negative 3/2 minus 1 is not going to give me a nice number. I can use my calculator and say negative 3 fraction button 2, that's negative 3/2, minus 1 gives me a mixed number. If I hit second fraction button enter, it's negative 5/2. And I can tell you this, if your y-intercept is going to be an ugly number, don't graph it from y equals mx plus b, graph it from point slope form. Because there's no way to be accurate when you're estimating where negative 5.5 is, which is why I used the point on that one to start from instead of the y-intercept. Okay? All right, happy studying.